Advances in AI, digital technologies, decentralized trials, and evolving regulatory frameworks are transforming how research is conducted and how quickly life-changing therapies reach to the patients. But with each and every transformation comes new challenge. That's why EthAum, the Zero BS Revenue Scaler and Fund, and DragOnFlow system are hosting a thought leadership panel on clinical trials, reimagined, innovations, and regulations driving outcome. Today, we have a very seasoned, diverse, and expert panel with us talking about different aspects of the business, of the innovation, and regulatory challenges. I would request the first panelist, Sarid, to go ahead and do the introduction. Sarid, please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. My name is Sarid Smadar, and I'm co-founder and CEO of DragOnFlow. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarid. And I'm sure that we will get a lot of insights from you during the conversation. So thanks a lot for joining us today. Sandeep, could you please go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sandeep Inamdar. I head up the Oncology Clinical Development Group at Sun Pharma Advanced Research Company.
Thank you, Sandeep. Really appreciate your time. And since you come from the pharma research background, I'm sure you will share a lot of insights on different kind of innovations that you may be evaluating or adopting at Sun Pharma. So really appreciate your time today. Puja, could you please go next?
Hi, I'm Puja Myles. So I work in the UK regulator of medical products, and I head up their real-world data research service. I've been involved in regulatory policy and science initiatives around the use of synthetic data in clinical trials, also looking at, AI medical devices, supporting decentralized clinical trials.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Puja. Dealing with regulatory bodies in Europe or UK is not easy. So I'm sure that you are going to share a lot of interesting insights from your side as well. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Surinder, could you please go next?
Sure. So I'm Surinder. I work with multiple organizations, but I currently head clinical research at Aster Hospitals in Bangalore. Besides that, I work closely with the pharma and the research industry across the globe.
Thanks a lot, Surinder. You have a diverse experience in the last decades with different kind of industries and now with hospitals. So I'm sure it is going to be a fun conversation with you. Really appreciate your time. Hitesh, please.
Yes, hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Hitesh Bharucha, and I am Vice President Clinical Studies for Dr. Agarwal's Eye Hospital. It's a multi-chain ophthalmology hospital. Look into the site operations, business development, and vendor onboarding for all the clinical studies within this hospital chain. And worked with multiple pharmaceutical and CROs in my previous assignments.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Hitesh. Your experience with CROs, with the pharma companies is going to be extremely valuable for today's conversation. So thanks a lot for joining us today. Last but not the least, we have Frenkel, who is the moderator, and dialing in at 6 a.m. today from US East Coast to moderate this panel. That requires a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. So Ran, please introduce yourself, and then floor is yours.
Thank you, Pankaj. My name is Ran, and I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer of Polaroid Therapeutics. So sometimes, it's wonder Polaroid, Polaroid, the cameras, Polaroid. Yes, we are all connected. But I'm coming with a background of drug development for many years actually in the oncology area. So I'm living and breathing clinical trials, innovations, and regulations for many, many years. And I'm happy to be here and engage in this panel with these esteemed colleagues. Thank you. So maybe I will dive into welcoming all of you and all the listeners to our webinar. So clinical trials reimagined, innovations and regulations driving outcome. It's a big statement. We have a lot to discuss here because, as you know, clinical trials, this is the driving force behind medicine. This is the driving force behind, and we have it for many years. And every couple of years, there's a little bit of small new innovations, but now we are all part of an era of significant seismic changes. And this is different from any other previous eras of the world of clinical trials. And we have new technologies. You are all part of understanding and the learning machines, the AI, synthetic data. We had Puja talking about all the things that she's doing at NHRA, and this is what we are going to talk about. This is new. But then there is also evolving regulations. And how do we deal with the evolving regulations that are always there to keep the safety, the ethics, and eventually the efficacy, because we are all developing drugs and treatments and medical devices to be used by patients. So we need to remember, we talk about innovations here, we talk about regulations, but at the end, we talk about patients. So how do we make sure that everything that we are doing and discussing here in the webinar, eventually giving better medicine for the patients? We shouldn't forget it. So you heard and Pankaj introduce all the panelists. All of them are expert in their domain. So I'm sure that we will have an interesting discussions. So let's get in, let's dive in. You will see that the way that it's built are several segments, but let's start with first talking about the innovations that are transforming the clinical trials. So without further ado, let's start with some questions. May I start with actually Sarid? What is the next major transformation after EDC and decentralized trials?
Well, thank you, Ran, for this question. Happy to be here again. Well, I think that after EDC digitized data capturing and decentralized trials expanded where trials happen, I believe that the next major transformation is with digitized execution. We all know that today clinical trials are digitally managed, obviously, but they are still manually executed. So protocols remain static documents interpreted differently at every site, creating sometimes variability, deviations, and also delays. So the next phase is turning protocols into executable systems, guided workflow that ensure procedures, eligibility, and safety steps all happen correctly in real time. So I think that this shift moves the industry from documenting what already happened to actively ensuring that trials will happen correctly as they occur. Just as EDC becomes the system of record for data, execution platform will become the system of action for clinical trials. The protocol execution layer is the missing infrastructure between protocol design and data capture. And this is, through my belief, is where the next major transformation is coming, through execution. Thank you.
Thank you. So one of the areas that is actually generating the most complicated clinical trials is oncology. So Sandeep, what innovations like adaptive trial designs and are accelerating drug development while improving patient-centric outcomes?
Yeah, thanks. So, I think fundamentally what does improve and accelerate studies in my experience has been a drug that is actually effective, right? That is probably the fastest, that's probably the one lever that has the fastest or greatest impact on sort of how fast you can get a drug to market. Now, that obviously is not, that happens well before the clinical trial is even started, it involves a lot of preclinical, but where it does impact, where the clinical trial aspect does impact is our ability to select the patients that are most likely to benefit, from the particular drug. So, for example, what is happening in the digital pathology space, and I know there are certain questions later on, but what's happening in the digital pathology space, which enables us to, unlike a manual pathology review, have the entire slide being scanned, for example, with these microscopes, have a much better algorithmic approach to selecting the patients that are most likely to benefit from the drug. I think that allows you to sort of shrink the denominator, if you will, in a clinical trial, reduces the number of patients you may have to enroll, but also enhances the effect size so that each individual patient that is enrolled is much likelier to experience a much greater benefit. So I think patient selection and the use of technology for improved patient selection, be it digital pathology, be it digital imaging modalities, all of those things I think are going to are already having and are continuing to have a big impact in accelerating oncology drug development.
Absolutely, but isn't it a little bit like cherry picking?
So cherry picking in the sense that which kind of patients are more likely to benefit. I mean, that is the whole name of the game, right? I mean, you want to increase the likelihood of a given patient responding and reduce the likelihood of a patient who is not likely to respond to experience the side effects from that drug. So I think the biomarker story is not the holy grail. I think it has significantly come of age in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. But I think where the new technologies are going to really help us is in that sort of domain where you can improve the way you identify these patients over and above what manual review is able to do, and do it at a faster rate that you can do.
Absolutely, thank you. So it's actually a good segue to Puja regarding some of her experience and about how is the synthetic data emerging as a potential solution for trials, such as creating control arms or boosting sample sizes.
So Ron, let me start by defining synthetic data because it can mean so many different things to different people.
Absolutely.
So when I say synthetic data, I mean artificial data that looks and feels and performs like real data, but has no real patient data in it. So, I mean, we can get into it later if people have interesting questions. So how do you generate it? But anyway, there are two key applications that we are seeing. One is, especially like you might have an area like oncology where typically there might be a single arm trial because it's not ethical or feasible to randomize cancer patients to like a placebo effect. But you might want to get an external control arm, so data from elsewhere, from either another clinical trial, historic or real world data. But also, we are living increasingly in a world where data governance has become really, really difficult, which means you cannot sometimes access these data sources because of privacy concerns. So this is where synthetic data versions, which are high fidelity, which can be used as a proxy for those data sets, can be brought in as external control arms. So that's one type of application. Another application is where you do have real data, but it's like maybe it's a clinical trial. So let's say it's a clinical trial, but you know that certain subgroups are not well represented in your clinical trial. And so you need to extrapolate your clinical trial findings to those subgroups that are missing. And you might be able to do computer simulations to actually predict what the effect would have been, or even like adverse effects in those cases. So those are the two broad areas that we're seeing the value of synthetic data in clinical trials.
And from the MHRA perspective or any other regulatory body, the approach towards synthetic arms will be as open as to real data, as to patients' data.
We're open to that, and in fact, we in fact right now have a regulatory sandbox which is ongoing, where we have 2 industry case studies where we're working through these scenarios as to what does good look like. So because we can say that we accept real world data, we can say we accept synthetic data, but there has to be some minimum quality standards that have to be met. So it's working through that. What would be our expectations around validation? So that's what we're doing. So that is, if you needed a stronger signal than that, I don't know what it is. So that's to encourage people to say, we are open to this. Of course, these need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. It may not be suitable for all cases. And that's why we're going to have some guidance as well in the future.
Absolutely. And this is actually one of the beautiful examples to see how our tech and the ability to have access to synthetic arms, to data generated from different databases or different origins comes together, and the regulatory body is actually looking at it in a very serious way, as it is a clinical trial, moving a little bit away from the traditional, not a little bit actually, significantly away from the traditional way to conduct randomized clinical trials. Okay, so maybe we can dive a little bit now to the regulation, how it actually becoming an enabler. Sometimes it is misperceived, I think, not only in our industry, that regulations or quality or something, they are not enablers. Actually, they are enablers. If we look at it from in a different perspective, we see that they are actually enablers and not inhibitors. So maybe Surinder, drawing from your work in India, actually, and globally, how have regulations on ethics and informed consent evolved to support innovative trials without compromising safety, of course?
Thank you. Thanks, Ram. If we really look at what has changed in the last 10 years, I think we have seen a significant change in the way trials are run, the trials are done, and we know we have digitized everything. We talked about, modernized framework, transitioning from the standard, the paper-based studies that we used to do to a decentralized form. Now, regulators have kept pace with that. If we look at from the modernized framework that they have come up with, integration of all the digital technologies like the e-consent, we talk about wearables, we talk about sensors, we talk about, besides the electronic data capture that we have been, a lot of these have been already incorporated, whether we talk about from an Indian guidelines perspective. Let's talk about the CDSCO. They have modernized everything and included in the regulations, in the draft regulations, in the new regulations, how remote access participation of patients. So basically, I see a lot of patient centricity getting into real trials, if you ask me, because everything is driven by that. And that is where the whole industry, be it pharma, be it regulators, it's ultimately patients are where everything we do about. And I think all of that has been already explained in the regulations. Same way, if you look at globally, you talk about the US common rule or the AUCT regulations, they've already brought in that, and India has adapted to that as well. Whether it is from a safety or ethical conduct, always, some of the regulatory changes that happened in India in terms of registrations of ethics committees, in terms of oversight from the committees and increasing that into and bringing that into regulations. So regulators have been keeping pace with whatever changes the industry has brought in over these years. And it has been very well explained. And I think, the industry always wants more from the regulators, because we always consider regulators as not facilitators. But I believe in the last 10 years, especially in India, we have seen a significant change whereby we have seen more facilitation happening. Though there's a lot to be done, but worldwide, I think we are always going towards, the regulators have been a part and a parcel of this. COVID has taught a big lesson to everybody, and I think that has really, enhanced the whole regulatory and the industry process together. I think we are going on that, right? And it is more good for patients, because ultimately it is the patient centricity that matters. And, even using remotely,
Uh,
delivering pharmacies, delivering everything at home, bringing tests, using wearables, everything has been incorporated. I think
Absolutely.
that has been significant over the years.
Absolutely, and I'm happy that we are bringing all the time back again and again the patient perspective, because at the end we need to realize we are talking about patients. And one aspect that I would like here, Surinder, to emphasize is actually the role of the pharma industry here, because it's very easy to throw everything on the regulators. Say, oh, they come up with this kind of regulations, and we cannot do our work, and we have to invest more money and do this and do that, and we are saying, okay, that's the regulator approach, and then also the informed consent on the patients. We have to look at think when the pharma industry will think on drug development that they are a patient, they will have the mindset of we are actually the patients. Yes, of course, it's a problem. Then actually you need less to reinforce the regulation, because there will be ethics from the get-go. There will be very clear what needs to be in the informed consent and what doesn't need to be in the informed consent, etc., in the innovation. So it's really also about what kind of level we would like to get from the pharma industry around us.
That's right. I think, if you look at it from a patient centricity, ultimately the sponsor or the pharma designs the protocol. I think it starts from there itself. When the protocols are designed, right from there, the patient centricity has to get in. Because because typically it has been pharma driven most of the time, that this is what we want, it is data. Whether it is easy or difficult for the patient, nobody has really looked into it. So I think that paradigm is completely changing, and pharma is accepting it. And I'll give you an example how we do it in India. The pharma and the government, the pharma sponsors, everybody with the government, we have been working together in the last 5-7 years as industry associations, and actually working with them together, that how do we really bring in these changes and what facilitates. The government has been extremely positive in terms of saying that what is it that you want, but at the same time within certain limited constraints, which we typically say, oh, regulators are blockers, which is not true, because we have to balance the population
Absolutely.
that they deal with. Regulators have a responsibility of assuring the people that whatever we are approving is right. So it
Absolutely.
has to be balanced in that sense. So I think it starts
Absolutely.
from the responsibility comes for every single person who is involved in this whole process of getting a new drug to the market or getting a new device to the market, and which involves each of these stakeholders in it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Puja, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but at the MHRA, what's some of the work, if you can share with us, some of the work that you are doing to facilitate the adoption of real-world data and AI to drive faster approvals, again, in the context of clinical trials and post-market surveillance?
So for real-world data, we've actually published quite a few guidelines. So we have 2 guidelines that are already published on the use of real-world data to support the clinical trial evidence package. But also we have a draft guideline which will be finalized by the end of this year, but it's out, it has been published, which is on using real-world data as external control arms. So just by publishing the guidelines, it's a clear signal, we hope, to everyone to say, well, we are open to this, but you have to meet certain standards, and this is what these standards are. We try to be very pragmatic in our guidelines as well, because it's not about, a black or white answer. It is about the context in which you are seeking to use these methods, these approaches. And as long as you can give a clear justification for why this is appropriate in this case, what are the limitations associated with these approaches? How will that impact your interpretation and the strength of the evidence? How would that, does that bring any uncertainty? So as long as you've considered all these things holistically, there isn't a problem. Other work, I mentioned the regulatory sandbox that's just been that is undergoing at the moment using synthetic data in the context of clinical trials. But also, we have supported these Centers for Excellence in Regulatory Science and Innovation. And one of the areas that's really exciting, again, in the context of clinical trials is in silico approaches. So in silico approaches are trials which are done in a virtual environment. So even before you do a trial in humans, so for example, for medical devices, if you're looking at a heart valve, there are so many elements that you might want to model, like in terms of the material, the fluid dynamics, how long will it last? Are there certain anatomies where that might be more prone to fail? And that is how you can then work out which patients are best suited to receive these, which are the designs that won't work. So even informing your clinical design using in silico approaches can be immense. We already are accepting routinely evidence from in silico approaches. So we all know that with dosing data to determine dosing, usually you have good information from adults, but pediatric dosing is difficult. So again,
Absolutely.
using these approaches for that is really good. And so we're disseminating and we're sharing these experiences so that people know that it's all right to come with these novel approaches to us.
But usually so I'm not talking about the big pharma, I'm actually talking about the startups or the small companies. So they when they have this plan to use in silico, to use any kind of more technical evidence along the journey of drug or device development, they discuss it with the MHRA prior to starting it. This is our role. Will you accept it? Or they just do it and cross fingers that it will work eventually.
So we have a number of initiatives. So one is a scientific advice opportunity. So there is you can apply to be part of that. So the advice can take many forms. So it can be simple written advice, which is for small queries. If you want a more extensive dialogue, then there is a fee associated with that. But what it gives you is it gives you certainty before you embark on a route that, okay, I will be meeting those standards, or these are the requirements. Is this sensible or not? We also have wider scientific dialogue programs, which is maybe there is a new innovative method or approach and people aren't sure. So this is in a pre-competitive space. So different industry partners can come together and just have a general discussion. Would this be acceptable if we were to hypothetically embark on this method? What would your expectations be? So all this is part of that pro-innovation regulation. So how do we support innovation, but at the same time, always being mindful of patient safety and benefit?
Of course. Thank you. So I have another question for probably a different webinar, is whether the MHRA is synchronizing these activities with the FDA or with EMA regarding this, but this is probably for a different webinar. So thank you, Puja. So Sandeep, from the pharma perspective, then how do regulation actually influence a trial design in area like oncology, immunology, others?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can speak to oncology because that's really the only area that I have spent my career in. So I think regulations obviously have a huge impact in terms of the guidances that come out, the changes in the guidances. Not just that, even, I think people in industry will be familiar, even the reviewers matter, right? I mean, certain reviewers will have a certain set of expertise, a certain biases. And so all of those things play a big role, and we take those all into account as we set up our data packages and so forth. So from a regulations standpoint, I think the critical thing for industry, I think if we had to ask is and it is by and large consistent, is to have a clear set of guidelines, right? I think that is really what helps us the most. We are happy to to adhere to whatever requirements there are for certain trials or certain endpoints, etc. But having that very clear understanding of what the regulators expect, I think different regulatory agencies around the world do kind of do a different job with this. I mean, certainly there are certain regulators that are very, very clear, have very clear guidances. There are others that are more evolving. But I think from my perspective, if we know going into a clinical trial design, what is the expectation of, let's say, the FDA or whichever regulatory body we are going to approach, that is probably the biggest force multiplier in terms of enabling us to design the right study, enroll the right patient, and at the end of the day, get a study design and an outcome that is beneficial for all involved.
Yeah. And sometimes there are situations, for example, you're developing a drug for endometrial cancer, and then you talk with the agencies or with the regular, and then they say, okay, but you need companion diagnostics, and companion diagnostics is changing everything from the design to the investment, etc. So you are showing it, or you're presenting it in a very nice way of this kind of actually discussion sometimes, because they may for something very for them it's very easy to put companion diagnostics, but it can change completely the program at the pharma company. So it is about also the dialogue between the industry and the regulator, back and forth, coming from a scientific and patient safety perspective, rather than just do more or do less. it's a complicated era. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think in our experience, at least my experience has been, with the US FDA, with the EMA, and then of course with more lately with the DCGI. And I have to say that all three regulators, with some differences, are quite open to have these dialogues. They are very free and frank with their feedback. By and large, I think the kind of engagement that I've seen even since the last 6 years that I've been working in India for Sun, and the engagements that we have had with the DCGI have, are dramatically improved, the way they are open to suggestions, the way they give us feedback. I think all of those things are quite there. And I think the open communication, as you describe, companion diagnostic is a good example. Ideally, you don't want to be the sponsor that is surprised that you need a CDX when you go to the agency. I hope you've done your, you understand your biology enough that you think you know that you need one. But I get your point is that the FDA in particular has this whole division that does that, and you are essentially working with an external agency like an Agilent or a Ventana that
Absolutely.
partners with you. So now you have three players in here. You have the regulator, you have the pharma sponsor, and you have the CDX player, and that adds its own layer of complexity. But to that whole point that I made earlier about digital pathology, I think that's going to be a huge thing, right? I mean, more and more, you may require 18 months, 2 years ahead of time to set up your trial in a way that your CDX can be implemented. Now, if you use some of these digital approaches, you could shrink that time, and you could,
Absolutely.
from going down like for a $5-7 million, you could maybe make it much significantly cheaper. That just helps, maybe it's not a big amount for big companies, but $5, $7, $10
No,
for biotechs
but
is
it's time. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank
those
you.
two things need to play with each other.
Absolutely. Thanks. So, Hitesh, how are evolving regulations enabling actually innovations without compromising, again, safety, particularly for decentralized elements, AI, machine learning tools, and real-world data?
Well, right. I think we've been discussing multiple points. I heard about adaptive trial platform and adaptive trial design. We spoke about real world evidence and acceptability on that, and wearable devices and companion diagnostics. Now, when we look at these, technology or innovations, and also kind of newer therapies and treatments which comes into play, we have to look into the logistics, the reach, the therapy, and then the acceptability, and where regulatory, I think, plays a very, very important role. And we have seen that it has been evolving. It's talking with pharma, it's talking with medtech, and it's trying to keep the pace going with what kind of innovations and technologies are coming up. Now, when it comes to regulatory, I'm sure Puja would also align with me that there are major two sets of points which comes in here. One is the principle base, and the other is the risk base. So when we have to talk about principle, we see that the recent change in the ICE GCP E6, we have R3, which has been introduced, amended, which talks about the decentralized trials, the acceptability of remote monitoring, the risk-based monitoring, how it has been defined, the check on the integrity. So regulators have been clear, and they have laid out that we have been seeing a lot of missing data. There is a lot of stop and gap in conducting very crucial clinical trials, maybe in cardiovascular, maybe in psychology or neurology, and you find that they are unable to put up the score right when they come for the discussions. And that is where the telemedications, home for patients, remote data has been credited, and R3 is included the acceptability of that. And we see that now we have clear guidances on how to look into it, how to frame your protocol, how to design your protocol, and based on that, how to define your monitoring plans and source data verification plans, and then site operations. Now, coming to this principle, which has been accepted and put into a guidance, we see that now AI/ML is playing a big role. So you have AI/ML driving multiple things where, there were a time delay or time crunch, and we want a lot of things real time. And that is where, like, the authorities have asked to validate your program, to have a change control check. You follow the audit trail and you manage the time so that, like, these pointers are like acceptable. And then you have the signaling done right when you are doing like, a lot of technology in that. So you have your certifications in place, you have your validation programming check base done, and that is where the integrity of that data is, like, can be managed and judged, and you can go back to that as well, because the patient's well-being and safety is, like, being a concern. Also, the data producibility. So when we say we are using data from wearable devices or, like, remote devices, so how credible this data is coming up. So we need to, like, find that score right. And that is where the regulators have come up and put across the M14 guidelines on real world data and safety checking. So this is where, like, how the evolvement is happening. And of course, like, regulatory doesn't look into, like, any kind of a roadblock, or maybe there is a delay to come to a consensus because multiple things are happening and technology is, like, coming up too fast. But I think it is evolving, and that is where, like, they are enabling it through certain guidelines and they are always open through scientific forum and through like, public releases of the draft. They always seek advices from the industry, from the pharma, from scientific forums, that this is a guideline which we are going to, like, come up with, and provide your inputs. They are open to that engagement, and that is how, like, they are not impeding anything, but they are enabling, like, future technology and future innovations. So yes, I think it is evolving, and it's listening to all of us, keeping the patient safety as central.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your answer. It's actually, again, a good segue to come to the last segment of our panel, and this is where we are in the intersection of the innovation and regulation. So we will focus on this in the next few questions and answers. And I think, based also, Hitesh, on what you said, I think that the enthusiasm about the regulations and the enabling innovations in all the development of new therapies, new treatments, the enthusiasm is actually with all stakeholders. So this is kind of a perfect situation where it's not only that the pharma industry is very happy because it can shorten or maybe reduce the cost of developing. They are enthusiastic about, from their perspective. The regulator is also enthusiastic because he gets actually better data. And the patients eventually are happy because indirectly they will get the treatments earlier. The medical community and the hospital, they are also happy. Everything is actually, if we do it, again, if we do it the right way, then it's a win-win for all stakeholders. But this is where ethics and also integrity comes into place. So moving into the last segment, then I'm going back to you, Sarid, and actually would like to understand how can tech innovation, like actually your protocol execution platform, align with the regulations to improve patient safety and also trial equity?
Yes, well, I think we can all agree that technology innovation in clinical trials should comply with regulation and should support it. Regulations already aim to protect patients and to ensure equitable access, of course, but today, at the end of the day, they are implemented through manuals, training session, and human interpretation. And that creates variability across sites and populations. So protocol execution platform changed this by embedding different regulation requirements directly into guided workflows. Instead of hoping that procedures are followed, the system ensured that they are followed in real time. Eligibility checks, dosing rules, calculation, safety monitoring, and documentation all happen automatically as part of the execution. So this improves the patient's safety and, and allows to errors to be prevented before they reach to the patient. It also improves the trial equity when execution becomes standardized and guided, smaller or less experienced sites, including community hospitals and diverse populations, can run complex trials safely and consistently. I think that in that sense, innovation is not just replacing regulation, it's not replacing regulation. It makes the regulation intent much more executable at scale. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sarid. Okay, so Surinder, in fields like vaccines, rare diseases, what regulatory changes could amplify innovative outcomes?
Well, see, vaccines and rare diseases are a different set in a way, if you ask me. See, we have now multiple new so-called pragmatic trial designs, which would include like the umbrella design, the adaptive designs, the basket designs. I think that kind of a requirement is needed in especially these kinds of studies where we will have to, and it's happening anyway, and these are already included, the new trial designs that we look at. So for these particular, like for example, in rare disease, you do not have enough patients. You would want to get a lot of outcomes within a limited set of patients. And also in terms of the trial stages as phase one, phase two, sometimes we may combine protocols whereby we are able to get to our conclusions within phase two design, and that acceptability by the regulators does happen. I've seen that happening in India and elsewhere as well. And sometimes only on the basis of biomarkers or secondary biomarker endpoints they apply and they provide those therapies to the market, limiting it to a clinical outcome study subsequently as a recommendation later on. Similarly, for vaccine studies, we need the pandemic has shown it. We could do what we in 2 years or
Exactly.
1.5 years, which we used to take 10 years. So I think these newer designs, applicability of these designs are the basic scientific way of getting into these kinds of therapies faster. Because ultimately, we need, if you have a pandemic, we could come up with this. Similarly, rare diseases, we don't have patients and we don't have treatments for them. So these newer trial designs are definitely going to be helpful. Whether, I think some of the things that the regulators have done, like the FDA breakthrough therapy and the EMA prime. So these are good examples to give us. What I would actually want is that, there are some reviews. For example, if I have a data package which I have to give, I would want to give data packages, whatever I have, give it to the regulators, let them start looking at it. And as my more and more data comes in, they keep on doing it. That is an ask I would want, because if we want to really see, we're all there. It's for everybody. Ultimately, it is the patient for whom we are doing everything, whether it is regulators or all stakeholders. You would want that to happen and not to always wait for a full-fledged package. That's something that would be in my ask. And the cross acceptance of data, using real world data, and basically, and that's happening significantly now. We see a lot of real world data being used for making approvals, and where we really need, where there are unmet medical needs, how do we get in there? So that applies to vaccines and rare diseases, where there is a need for urgent approvals, and all of us have to really take. So the pharma companies and the sponsors have to come up with innovative designs to create those basket trial designs or umbrella designs whereby they can get multiple outcomes and keep submitting those to the regulators. That's what I'm saying. The regulators, we need that, okay, they submit and they come back and again change, make it adaptive, and so that we are able to get quicker designs. Now with gene therapies and all, it's very, very important. Sometimes it is precision medicine, which is specific to that particular set of patients. So the reviews and everything has to happen in that way. I think that is the innovation, and where centralization, digitization, everything will work along with it. It's extremely, extremely important that we do it in that fashion. A lot of it is happening. A lot needs to be done in that area, especially with the newer therapies that come in.
Absolutely. Thank you. So maybe we can a little bit think about about the future now. So, maybe the short term, the long term future. So, Hitesh, which innovation actually will most reduce trial timelines in the next 3 years, from your opinion? AI, native protocol design, digital biomarkers from wearables, adaptive platforms, etc., and why?
So I think, well, it'll be like, a mix of everything. I mean, if you call about APT or ATD, so these protocols or these designs are giving us the flexibility to, like, change the arms or change the eligibility criteria, look at the data sets during the conduct of the study. Before interim analysis, it can give you a kind of a predictive, like, results through which you can change the eligibility and like, rework on the part. Of course, I mean, to conduct and to take this forward, a lot of adaptive, like, scientific inputs and adaptive inputs are also required, and which would definitely decrease the like, the timeline in terms of getting the responses right. And we have a real-time track on where your endpoints are going and leading, and, like, to give a kind of alarming or alerts on a right way to the investigators or within the scientific field. So I think this adaptive trial designs or platform is doing it part, and then combining it with AI and optimizing AI in that, with right signaling and putting up your risk indicators, like, well advanced, then I think it will definitely preempt any kind of amendments which are there, which might, like, hit in a traditional way. So you avoid those kind of delays and like, have a lesser amendments in the study, and, like, reduce the timeline there as well. And with that, of course, like, you optimize the use of AI in pharmacovigilance and safety signaling, have your reporting done right. And I think with well documentation, I think the future it's very, very bright. So I think we are not like, changing the conventional or the traditional part, like, with all due respect. But of course, if we do not change, we would be really, like, replaceable. So I think we should be agile, and we should, like, embrace the changes which are coming with a caution that like, these are all validated and aligned with the regulatory and the framework. So that's more important.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. So then if we try, and I know that it's very hard to look into, the crystal ball of 5 years from now, especially when talking about technology and advancement. But then, if we can just sum up, and I'm throwing it to the entire panel with really one bold prediction from each of you, whether you're all aligned with Hitesh or you think different, what will be your prediction, in the next 5 years regarding the innovation and regulations? Anyone from the panel members?
Well, let me come in first. So I think, see, the digitization, the AI thing, the technology is going to change every single day. And how to really keep pace, we can't really predict what's going to happen tomorrow. And we know this will keep changing. I think it's important that the regulations, along with that, also keep pace. Now, it's very difficult, but one has to really come up to that level. So from that point of view, which is easy, which I made my ask earlier on, so that this will keep changing. We can't stop technology. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and it will change very rapidly. I think the most important thing I would really wish that regulators do, which is easy to do, relative to whatever they do today, is, I would say, the rolling reviews. As I said, if you have one data, that is something that can keep pace. Otherwise, we'll keep waiting. So that is one. Cross acceptance of data, which is happening quite to a reasonable extent, but more acceptance of data from one region to another, or one regulation to regulator to other, because that will hasten this whole process, because that's very important. But as I said, technology will change. This is some of the changes that the regulations might need to do, or the regulators across the globe might need to do that. And two things: rolling reviews, not wait for full packages, and accept data from
Very
across
nice.
regulations. Yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else that wants to have his projection?
I can go next, Ran. So I would slightly rephrase your question, because I say a prediction feels like a very passive. I think we should rephrase it to what should be our bold ambition, where we have more
Perfect.
agency and we work towards it together. I would like to see in silico methods, synthetic data, real world data, evidence, and AI all being used so routinely that they're no longer seen as innovation. Because ultimately, our aim is to get critical medicines to market faster to the patients who need them in a safer way.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so let's actually move and Sarid, you mentioned about the trial execution, the protocol execution platform in a bit, and maybe it's good that we will link it now and understand how actually the thing that DragOnFlow is doing going to influence the future of clinical trials. So I'm moving here the stage to you to present a little bit what you're doing.
Thank you, Ran. Well, basically, DragOnFlow turns complex clinical trial protocols into automated, interactive workflows that actually execute the protocol at the site level. Instead of just collecting data using forms and checklists, we embed the protocol logic or the calculation and compliance checks directly into a single guided workflow. Investigator teams are led step by step, errors are prevented before they happen, and studies run faster and more consistently with less site burden. In a phase 3 oncology trial of myelofibrosis study conducted in Vienna, Austria, DragOnFlow achieved full screening adherence and reduced screening time from 40 minutes to 9 minutes. It's a 77% improvement with excellent clinician feedback. And our vision at the end of the day goes beyond trials. The same execution layer applies to therapy, to medical device, IFUs, and complex treatment. And we would like to position DragOnFlow as the operational backbone for clinical development and goes up to commercial use. We believe that execution will become the next mandatory infrastructure layer in life science in general, and DragOnFlow is building that category. Let me perhaps put a few words on how does it work. So basically, we start with presenting the protocol as a visual flowchart using standard tools like Visio or Draw.io. Our platform then automatically transforms the diagram into an interactive workflow that runs on mobile, tablet, or desktop. And then during the patient visit or the participant, the investigator simply follows the guided workflow. The system asks all the required questions, gathers all data, indexes, perform calculation, checkups, legibilities, and threshold, and directs the next step according to the protocol. At the end of the process, it automatically generates a complete audit trail, ensuring that the protocol was executed correctly and consistently. In short, we turn protocols from documents that people read into processes that actually run.
So
That's
can you show us a little bit how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me share my screen, please.
And to all the panelists, while Sarid is showing this the system, if you and I'm sure I have some questions, but if you have some questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah. So this is a well-published. This is the myelofibrosis trial that was made in Vienna. It's all published information, so we can show it. And you've seen quite a few of these.
This is the one you referred to before?
Yes, indeed. This is the one. And as you can see here, the investigator has a few tasks. That's why it took 40 minutes. For instance, dynamic DIPSS get intermediate 2, the investigator had to make the calculation by entering outside system, which through MedCalc, for instance, and make the calculation there, put all the data, and then put it back. And we continue, and we're looking here at MFSAF, again, to scale from 0 to 10 different symptoms, and to assure that at least one got 5 points, and at least 3 or greater got 2 points. And we're working, continue towards ULN, upper limit normal, etc. That is why it took 40 minutes, long time to walk through this protocol. And what we basically did, we took the complete protocol information and we just presented it. We didn't change anything as a flowchart. And of course, throughout this process, the investigators validated everything and they saw that everything is in parallel to what we have made. And as soon as we had this validated and assured by the investigators, our technology, our tool automatically convert this into an automated interactive workflow that has this instant messaging presented, like runs on mobile, tablet, or desktop. And I would like to emphasize that we're not talking about inserting another software, because in the end of the day, no one wants another software. Investigators, sponsors, NCROs are all, and sites, of course, overloaded with extra softwares and more tools. Here we are talking about an instant messaging-like interface that is accompanying the investigator words in a very easy-to-use workflow. So by saying software, it will be a wrong manner, and I think that that's why we're using a workflow in that respect. So
but then this becomes the source document, Sarid.
This is the source document now, and what we have here a little bar, very intuitive manner. I've already started to fill this up, and let's jump straight to what we've seen here. So even, just to assure that the patient or participant they're above 18, we're not asking anything, simply asking the investigator to enter the age rather than think about above 18 or no, or any complex question that might be confusing later on. And here we can see the DIPSS, which originally the investigator had to go and enter into MedCalc, as you see, to make a calculation of estimated survivals with patients with myelofibrosis. But what we created is a little form, and all the calculation being done locally. We got already the age from previously, and if we were connected, which is of course possible, to the EDC or to EMR in specific occasions, we could then insert automatically and actually inject the data automatically here and simply make the calculation again locally. So everything is within the same workflow. And here we took a very cumbersome article about JAK inhibitor treatment. We dissect it and we present only the relevant parts according to the profile of the participant, and it's much more addressable and coherent to understand. And we have the MFSAF. Again, while the patient visit, simply the investigator is interviewing the participant, answering and just clicking on the buttons, and behind the scene, DragOnFlow is checking all the eligibility and making the business logic behind the scene. Again,
no, but then what happened? Yeah. What happened? You said about eligibility. So what happens when it actually doesn't meet the criteria? So you get an immediate alert. What happens?
You get an immediate alert, or the system does not allow you to proceed. So you know that the system flags that there is an issue, and according to this, the investigator responds. And here we continue with ULN. Again, upper limit normal. The investigator does not have to get into the calculations based on the lab equipment that they are providing, but simply entering only the data for AST, ALT, ALP, etc. And the calculation is being done behind the scene. And then as we got into ECOG, how the patient responds to chemotherapy, the system, I just failed it. The system raised a flag and allows the investigator to sign this off. The patient does not meet the criteria, and we immediately create a report that again provides all the data, which acts as an audit trail, and of course the source document, all the data here, all the values, the dates, result, and this could be either printed out as a PDF or injected automatically to the EDC according to the necessity. That's the basic idea as we can see it.
Okay. Anyone from the panel members?
One quick question.
Yes, Hitesh, please.
Yes. Hi. So I think this is a wonderful tool to have and check the eligibility and get that prompt immediately. One point. So apart from checking the eligibility, how does it work? Can it also help in registering and remembering the follow-up visit, and kind of give the site and overview on the overall patient journey in the study? What else this tool can help?
This tool has many aspects in different stages of the trial, starting from the pre-screening, and basically you could use it for the pre-screening, go to the screening before that for the training of the staff. So instead of having a big large booklet, you're going to have the workflow that basically allows the investigator, when they are trained and when they are looking at all the information, to review it accordingly. So also the training is being shortened. This has multiple implications on different stages of the trial, so it allows the trial to be much more focused with a lot of time and resource saves.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So quick question here. I know we need to get into more details to understand through a different demo, but quickly you mentioned, it will be specific for a study. Now, does it encounter, any study which is going for 2 or 3 years, for example, there might be protocol amendments. Does it get into the protocol amendment aspects and it is taken care of at the back end by your team? Is that how it works?
Yes, absolutely. We have actually 2 different stages. The first stage is describing the protocol as a flowchart, and basically as soon as we have amendment, we simply change and modify the flowchart accordingly, which basically a few diagram sketches, and then as soon as we upload it again to the server throughout our technology, the amendments are taking place. So it's very easy and quickly, rather than have a complete system have to be changed, all the booklets and everything. So basically the source document is changed immediately upon the change of the diagram. So it's very flexible, and amendments, as often they take place, are being changed quite dynamically.
Great. That helps.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. So we are already a little bit over time, so excuse us, but we had a lot of questions and engagement, which is great. So when I will try to wrap up quickly what we have discussed without going into the details, but on one end, we saw a lot of innovations coming up, different kind of technologies. One of them is the protocol execution platform. Others that we have talked about, the synthetic ones, the AIs, the machine learning. We all aware of what kind of opportunities actually these innovations are bringing to our world. But opportunities means that we need to tailor them in the right way to get the maximum benefit of it. And this is where the regulatory bodies come into place. This is where the patient comes into place. This is where the pharma industry comes into place. And I think that what we also heard from Sarid about DragOnFlow is the way that I'm seeing it is it's kind of a glue, because the weak part that we as sponsors are usually having in clinical trials is that we are not there in the room. We are not there in the part of the execution. So the protocol can be as good as it can get. We can have a lot of technology to support it, but at the end, in that clinic in the room, it's the PI or the study coordinator with the patients. We are not there, and I'm not criticizing this point. we shouldn't be there. It's a discrete moment. It should be between the caregiver and the patient. Nevertheless, we know that they have other things to do. We know that clinical trials is another activity that we are doing. What can we do in order to make sure that actually they are following our protocol, the things that we put so much thoughts and resources into, and this is the glue, the protocol execution platform gives this ability to ensure and guarantee that all the other places are in the right place. So this is why I think, yes, that it's a good example to show and bring here in this webinar when we talk about meaningful, critical changes within the world of drug and device development. So I would like to thank my friends here for a lovely discussion. I'm sure that we can continue for another couple of hours, but it's Friday, and it's been wonderful and I hope it was interesting for all of you. One thing that you also felt from all the stakeholders here, it's passion. You cannot develop a drug, you cannot develop a medical device without a passion to develop, to bring to the world, to bring to patients some new and better medicines. So thank you all for joining me. I'm getting it back to you, Pankaj. Thank you very much.
No, thanks a lot to all the panelists for joining this session today. And this is what happens when such diverse and experts from different fields and background come and they talk about such a complex topic in a very simplified manner. The kind of insights that we gathered today are really, really fabulous. So really appreciate your time, and I hope that we can reconnect and explore more on how to collaborate, how to support each other. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.